The morning sun rose over the green fields of Velthari Prime, just like it had for the past 300 years. The tall, lizard-like Velthari worked peacefully in their gardens, tending to the strange blue plants that fed half the galaxy. Their scaled hands moved gently among the leaves, checking each plant with the care of a parent watching over a child. Elder Moss Singer stood on the high platform of the main settlement, looking out over the endless farmlands. His old eyes, clouded with age, still sparkled with pride. The Velthari had built something beautiful here. No weapons, no armies, just food and peace. They sold their crops to anyone who needed them and never asked for anything but fair payment. The first sign of trouble came as a shadow across the sun. Young Bloom Watcher was working in the far fields when she saw the ships. They came down from the sky like black rain, thousands of them. The vessels were ugly things, all sharp edges and gun barrels. They landed with thunderous crashes that shook the ground and sent the peaceful farm animals running in terror. Bloom Watcher dropped her tools and ran. Behind her, she could hear the sound of weapons firing and Velthari screaming. The invaders moved fast. They wore heavy armor and carried guns that could cut through anything. They shot first and asked questions later. By the time Bloom Watcher reached the main settlement, half of it was burning. The beautiful gardens lay trampled under the boots of soldiers. The Kethvor had arrived, and they brought only death and slavery. The Kethvor were a species that believed in one simple rule: the strong take from the weak. They looked like giant insects with hard shells and too many arms. Each warrior stood twice as tall as a Velthari and carried enough weapons to arm a small army. They had conquered dozens of worlds and turned them into factories and mines. Now they wanted Velthari Prime for its rich soil and peaceful workers. Elder Moss Singer watched from his platform as Kethvor dropships landed in his gardens. Soldiers poured out, grabbing any Velthari they could find. Some were shot for running too slowly. Others were dragged away in chains. The lucky ones died quickly. Elder Bloom Watcher reached the platform, her green scales dark with sweat and fear. They are everywhere. The outer settlements are gone. Moss Singer nodded sadly. He had lived through many seasons but never thought he would see this day. The Velthari had no army, no weapons, no way to fight back. They had always believed that if you hurt no one would hurt you. They were wrong. How many ships? He asked. I stopped counting at 200, Bloom Watcher replied. Maybe more. They have big ones in the sky, just sitting there like they own the place. Above them, the Kethvor war fleet hung in space like a black cloud. Massive battleships, each one bigger than the largest Velthari city. Smaller ships flew back and forth carrying stolen goods and captured slaves up to the larger vessels. Moss Singer made a decision that would change everything. Come with me, he told Bloom Watcher. They ran through the burning settlement to the communication center. The building was damaged but still working. Moss Singer's old hands shook as he turned on the emergency broadcast system. What are you doing? Bloom Watcher asked. Calling for help, the elder replied. Someone out there must care about what happens to peaceful people. The communication system was old but powerful. It could send messages across the galaxy, reaching every species that listened to the emergency channels. Moss Singer had never used it before. The Velthari had never needed to ask for help. He began to speak into the transmitter. His voice was calm and clear, even as explosions shook the building around him. This is Elder Moss Singer of Velthari Prime, he said. We are under attack by the Kethvor Dominion. They are killing our people and taking our children as slaves. We have no weapons and no way to fight back. We grow food for anyone who needs it. We have never hurt anyone. Please, if there is anyone out there who believes that peaceful people should be protected, we need your help. We cannot stop them alone. The message went out into space, carried by radio waves that would take hours or days to reach other star systems. Moss Singer sent it again and again, hoping that someone would hear and care enough to respond. Outside, the Kethvor continued their work. They set up slave pens and began sorting the captured Velthari. The strong ones would work in the mines. The smart ones would work in the factories. The young ones would be raised as servants. The old and weak were simply shot and thrown into mass graves. By evening, most of Velthari Prime belonged to the invaders. The Kethvor moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. They knew exactly how to break a peaceful people and turn them into property. Bloom Watcher helped Moss Singer send the message through the night. Sometimes they had to stop when Kethvor patrols came too close. They could hear the soldiers laughing as they burned libraries and destroyed artwork. The invaders took pleasure in erasing the Velthari culture. As the hours passed, responses began to come in. The first few gave Moss Singer hope. The peaceful Zel Nari sent words of sympathy and promised to protest the invasion in the Galactic Council. The wise ethereal minds offered to preserve Velthari culture in their vast libraries, so it would not be completely lost. But as more messages arrived, hope began to fade. Every species had the same basic response. We are sorry, but we cannot help. The Kethvor are too strong. Fighting them would only lead to more death. The Centauri Republic said they were too far away. The Aquatic Federations claimed they had no ships that could travel to dry planets. The Silicon Collective explained that biological concerns were outside their programming. One by one, every major power in the galaxy found a reason to do nothing. Some were honest about their fear. The Hive Queens admitted that their fleets were no match for Kethvor firepower. The Crystal Cities said they had learned not to interfere with species that could crack planets in half. By dawn of the second day, it seemed clear that no help was coming. The galaxy was full of civilized species who cared deeply about justice and peace, but none of them were willing to risk their own safety to protect others. Moss Singer sat in his damaged communication center, surrounded by messages of sympathy and regret. Outside, the Kethvor were building permanent structures. They planned to stay forever. Then something strange happened. A new message came in, from a part of space that most species avoided. The signal was strong and clear, but the language was one that few in the galaxy bothered to learn. It came from the region known as Deathworlder territory. Bloomwatcher looked at the translation with confusion. "Elder," she said, someone answered. "But I do not understand their response." Moss Singer read the simple message. "We are coming. Hold on." It was signed by something called the Human Defense Fleet. The message from Velthari Prime reached the human monitoring station at exactly 14:37 station time. Lieutenant Yuna Young was drinking her third cup of coffee when the emergency beacon started flashing on her screen. She had been monitoring the deep space channels for 6 months and had never seen anything more exciting than shipping schedules and weather reports. The distress call was different. As she listened to Elder Moss Singer's calm voice describing the attack on his people, something cold settled in her stomach. She had heard about the Kethvor before. Everyone in the galaxy had heard about them. They were the monsters that civilized species whispered about in dark corners. Young did not hesitate. She hit the emergency alert and patched the signal directly to Fleet Command. Within minutes, every human officer in the system was listening to the Velthari Elder's desperate plea for help. Admiral Lee Tae-min was reviewing supply reports when the call came through. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his days as a fighter pilot. He had commanded the human fleet for 15 years and had never seen a situation that required immediate action more than this one. He listened to the message 3 times, then called an emergency meeting. Within an hour, every senior officer in the fleet was sitting around the conference table in the command ship. The room was quiet as they listened to Moss Singer's voice again. "How many ships do the Kethvor have in that system?" Taemin asked. Commander Cho Min-ho, the intelligence chief, pulled up the data. "Our scouts counted at least 8,000 vessels, sir. Maybe more. They brought everything they had." Captain Park Ji-woo leaned forward in his chair. He was a compact man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Sir, if we are going to help these people, we need to move fast. The Kethvor do not waste time with their slave operations." Dr. Kim So-ra spoke up from the end of the table. She was the fleet's expert on alien biology and culture. "The Velthari are completely peaceful, sir. They have never developed weapons or military technology. They cannot defend themselves at all." Timon stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the human fleet. Hundreds of ships floated in formation, their gray hulls bristling with weapons. Each vessel was built for one purpose: to fight and win wars. "How long to gather the full fleet?" he asked. 12 hours, sir," replied Captain Ryu Jae-sung, the logistics commander. "But sir, are we really going to take on the entire Kethvor Dominion for a species we have never met?" Taemin turned back to face his officers. His expression was hard as stone. "Commander Cho, show them the intelligence files on Kethvor slave operations." The lights dimmed and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed images that made even experienced soldiers look away. Kethvor slave camps, mass graves, factories where captured aliens worked until they died from exhaustion. The Kethvor have destroyed 47 civilizations in the past century, Taimin said. They turn entire species into property. They kill anyone who cannot work and enslave the rest. And right now, they are doing this to a people whose only crime was growing food for anyone who needed it. He looked around the table at each officer. I do not care if the Velthari have never met us before. I do not care if helping them makes the galaxy think we are dangerous. What I care about is that there are peaceful people being murdered and enslaved while we sit here talking. Captain Park nodded slowly. What are your orders, sir? Signal every ship in the fleet. Emergency mobilization. Combat loading. We leave in 10 hours. Taimin's voice was cold and steady, and send a message back to the Velthari. Tell them help is coming. The next 10 hours were a storm of activity. Human ships from across the system converged on the main fleet base. Supply ships worked around the clock to load ammunition and fuel. Medical ships prepared for heavy casualties. Transport ships loaded with Marines and their equipment. The human fleet that assembled was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 47 massive dreadnoughts, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. 156 destroyers, fast ships designed to hunt down and kill enemy vessels. 400 fighter carriers, packed with small ships piloted by humans who thought 6 gravity turns were fun. But it was not just the number of ships that made other species fear the human fleet. It was how they were built. While other civilizations made beautiful vessels with smooth curves and artistic designs, humans built machines of war. Human ships were angular and ugly, covered in armor and weapons. They had no decorative elements, no wasted space. Every inch was designed for fighting. As the fleet prepared to leave, word began to spread through the galaxy. The humans were mobilizing their entire navy. Species that had never heard of the Velthari suddenly learned their name as news networks reported on the massive human response. The reaction was mixed. The peaceful civilizations that had sent sympathetic messages to the Velthari were amazed. Someone was actually going to help. But others were terrified. The galaxy had heard stories about human warfare, and none of them were pleasant. The Zelnari Council held an emergency session. They remembered their first contact with humans 50 years ago. The human ambassador had been polite and friendly, but when negotiations became difficult, she had calmly explained that her fleet could turn their homeworld into a glass ball within 6 hours, if they preferred that to peaceful trade. The Zelnari had signed the trade agreement immediately. The insectoid hive minds of the outer spiral recalled human merchants who visited their worlds carrying enough personal weapons to level small cities. The humans claimed the weapons were just for self-defense, but the hive minds noticed that no one ever tried to cheat or rob human traders. As the human fleet began its journey to Velthari Prime, intelligence reports reached the Kethvor Dominion. Supreme Admiral Bloodtalon read the reports with amusement. Humans were just another primitive species from the galaxy's edge. They had some decent technology, but nothing that could match Kethvor military might. Bloodtalon had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved hundreds of species. He commanded the largest fleet in Kethvor history. The idea that some unknown aliens could threaten his operation was laughable. He sent a message to his fleet commanders. Unknown species approaching system. Estimated arrival in 6 days. Continue normal operations. If they interfere, destroy them. But some of his officers were not so confident. Intelligence reports about human capabilities were strange and contradictory. Some sources claimed humans were peaceful traders. Others described them as the most dangerous predators in known space. The truth seemed to depend on who was talking and what had happened during their encounters with humans. Captain Vextar, one of Bloodtalon's senior commanders, reviewed the reports with growing concern. Humans came from a world that other species called a death world, a planet so dangerous that most aliens could not survive there for more than a few hours. The gravity was too strong, the weather too violent, the native life too aggressive. But that was not what worried Vextar the most. What worried him was the reports of human combat behavior. Unlike other species, humans seemed to have no limits on how they fought. They used weapons that other civilizations considered too dangerous. They employed tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare, and they never ever gave up. There were stories of human ships continuing to fight even after suffering damage that should have killed everyone aboard. Stories of human soldiers who kept fighting with broken bones and massive injuries. stories of human commanders who chose to ram enemy ships rather than surrender. Vextar tried to bring these concerns to Blood Talon, but the Supreme Admiral dismissed them. Fear makes soldiers see monsters where none exist, he said. These humans are just another weak species that will learn to bow before HFY might. Meanwhile, the human fleet traveled through hyperspace toward Velthari Prime. The ships moved in perfect formation, their crews preparing for what many expected to be the largest battle in human history. In the medical bays, doctors prepared for thousands of casualties. In the armories, weapons specialists checked and rechecked every gun and missile. Admiral Taemin stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the stars rushing past. In 3 days, they would arrive at Velthari Prime. In 3 days, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone attacked peaceful people while humans were watching. He thought about the Velthari Elder's message, the calm dignity in the old alien's voice as he described the destruction of his world. Taemin had heard many distress calls in his career, but few had affected him so deeply. "Sir," Captain Park appeared at his side. "Final equipment checks are complete. All ships report ready for combat." Taemin nodded. "Signal the fleet. Combat alert status until further notice, and send another message to the Velthari. Tell them we will be there soon." The message that went out to Velthari Prime was simple. "Hold on. The cavalry is coming." The human fleet traveled through hyperspace like a storm made of metal and purpose. For 3 days, they moved through the twisted dimensions between stars, following routes that would bring them to Velthari Prime faster than anyone thought possible. The ships flew in perfect formation, their crews working around the clock to prepare for what everyone knew would be a massive battle. Admiral Lee Taemin spent most of his time on the bridge, studying intelligence reports and battle plans. The HFY had brought their entire main fleet to Velthari Prime, over 8,000 ships of various sizes. It was the largest enemy force humans had ever faced in a single battle. "Sir," Commander Cho Min-ho approached with a tablet full of new information. "We have updated intelligence on HFY defensive positions. They have arranged their fleet in a standard siege formation around the planet." Taemin looked at the tactical display. The HFY ships formed layers around Velthari Prime like the shell of an egg. The largest battleships stayed in high orbit, while smaller vessels moved back and forth between the planet and the fleet, carrying slaves and stolen goods. "They are not expecting a real fight," observed Captain Park Ji-woo, who had joined them on the bridge. "This formation is designed to control a planet, not defend against an attacking fleet." "Good," Taemin replied. "That will make our job easier." In the medical bay of the flagship, Dr. Kim So-ra was preparing for casualties. She had studied HFY biology and knew their weapons could cause terrible wounds. But she was more worried about the humans under her care. Human soldiers had a bad habit of fighting until they collapsed, ignoring injuries that would stop most other species. "Doctor," her assistant approached with a concerned expression. "We have received a strange message from the Galactic Medical Council. They are warning us about treating HFY prisoners." So-ra frowned. "What kind of warning?" "They say HFY soldiers have poison glands that activate when they are captured. Any medical staff trying to help them could be killed." So-ra considered this information carefully. The Galactic Medical Council was known for their peaceful approach to healthcare. If they were warning about treating HFY prisoners, the situation must be very dangerous. "Prepare isolation units," she decided. "We will help any wounded prisoners, but we will take precautions." Throughout the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. In the fighter bays, pilots checked their weapons and practiced attack formations. Human fighters were small and fast, designed to get close to enemy ships and cause maximum damage. The pilots who flew them were trained from childhood to handle accelerations that would kill most aliens. Flight Commander Shin Bo-ram walked through her squadron's ready room, watching her pilots prepare for combat. They were young men and women with steady hands and quick reflexes. Most had never seen a real battle, but their training was intense and thorough. "Listen up," she called to her pilots. "Intelligence says the HFY have about 2,000 fighter craft. That means we are outnumbered 5 to 1. One of the younger pilots raised his hand. "Commander, is that a problem?" Bo-ram smiled. It was not a nice smile. "No, Lieutenant. That just means we do not have to worry about running out of targets." The pilots laughed, but there was tension under their humor. Everyone knew the next few days would test everything they had learned about combat flying. Meanwhile, the galaxy was watching the human fleet's progress with a mixture of fascination and terror. The humans had not tried to hide their movements. Their massive fleet was impossible to miss as it traveled through neutral systems on its way to Velthari Prime. Ambassador Kang Hai-jin was on the diplomatic ship that traveled with the fleet. His job was to coordinate with other species and explain human intentions. It was not an easy task. Most galactic civilizations had never seen humans respond to a crisis with such overwhelming force. Ambassador, his aide brought him a stack of messages from various governments. The Stellar Federation wants to know if we plan to occupy Velthari Prime after we liberate it. The Crystal Cities are asking if we intend to claim salvage rights on destroyed Kethvor ships, and the Aquatic Federations want to know if we are planning to attack any other Kethvor worlds. Hai-jin rubbed his temples. Every species in the galaxy seemed to think humans had some hidden agenda. They could not understand that humans might fight simply because it was the right thing to do. Send the same response to everyone, he told his aide. We are going to free the Velthari and leave. We do not want their planet. We do not want Kethvor territory. And we do not want to rule anyone. We just want the killing to stop. But even as Hai-jin sent out diplomatic messages, he knew many species would not believe them. The galaxy was used to species that conquered for profit or political advantage. The idea of fighting a war just to help strangers was so unusual that most aliens thought it must be a lie. The Zelnari Council met in emergency session to discuss the human response. They were a peaceful species that had been trying to find a diplomatic solution to the Velthari crisis for weeks. The idea that someone would simply attack the Kethvor without trying negotiation first was shocking to them. Perhaps we should contact the human fleet, suggested Council Leader Veltar. We could offer to mediate between them and the Kethvor. Surely there is a peaceful solution to this problem. But Elder Morden shook his head sadly. I have studied the humans for many years. They do not negotiate with species that enslave peaceful peoples. They have a saying, some problems can only be solved with superior firepower. The council was quiet as they considered this. They had spent weeks trying to find a diplomatic solution, while the Velthari were being murdered and enslaved. The humans had simply decided to solve the problem with violence. It was primitive and barbaric, but it might actually work. On Velthari Prime, the situation was getting worse every day. The Kethvor had turned the beautiful farming world into a prison camp. Millions of Velthari worked in the fields under armed guard, forced to grow food that would feed Kethvor soldiers on other conquered worlds. Elder Mossinger was in one of the slave camps, digging irrigation ditches under the hot sun. His old body was not designed for hard labor, but the Kethvor guards did not care about age or weakness. Anyone who could not work was shot and thrown into mass graves. Elder, whispered Bloomwatcher, who was working beside him, do you really think the humans will come? Mossinger looked up at the sky, where Kethvor ships moved back and forth like dark clouds. I do not know, child, but I have to believe that somewhere in this galaxy, there are people who care about justice. The Kethvor were also preparing for the human arrival, but their preparations were very different. Supreme Admiral Bloodtalon had positioned his fleet to crush any attack quickly and decisively. He had faced many species over the years, and none had been able to stand against Kethvor military might. How many ships are the humans bringing? He asked his intelligence officer. Approximately 3,000 vessels, Supreme Admiral. A significant force, but much smaller than ours. Bloodtalon laughed. 3,000 ships against 8,000. These humans must be very stupid or very brave. Either way, they will be very dead soon. But Captain Vextar was still worried about the intelligence reports. Human ships were designed very differently from those of other species. While most civilizations built vessels that could serve multiple purposes, humans seemed to build ships that were designed only for fighting. Supreme Admiral, he said carefully, perhaps we should consider repositioning the fleet. Our current formation leaves us vulnerable if the humans use unconventional tactics. Unconventional tactics? Bloodtalon scoffed. There is only one way to fight a space battle, Captain. You line up your ships and shoot until the enemy is destroyed. These humans will learn this lesson just like every other species we have conquered. Unknown to the Kethvor, human intelligence was far better than they realized. Human scout ships had been watching Kethvor operations for months, gathering detailed information about their ships, weapons, and tactics. The humans knew exactly what they were facing. General Bae Dong-wook was in charge of the ground forces that would liberate the Velthari slave camps. He studied maps of the planet's surface, planning how to free millions of prisoners without getting them killed in the crossfire. The Kethvor have built their main camps near population centers, he told his officers. They are using the Velthari as human shields. We will need to be very careful with our bombardment. Major Oh Kyung-soo, who commanded the Special Forces units, had a different concern. Sir, what about Kethvor soldiers who try to surrender? Our intelligence says they prefer death to capture. Bay considered this. We offer quarter to anyone who lays down their weapons. If they refuse, we treat them as active combatants. But remember, our primary mission is to save the Velthari. Do not take unnecessary risks. As the fleet neared its destination, the final preparations were completed. Weapons were loaded, armor was checked, and final prayers were said. The humans knew they were about to face the largest battle in their history. Many would not survive the next few days. But there was no doubt in anyone's mind about what they were doing. Somewhere ahead of them, peaceful people were suffering and dying. That was all the reason humans needed to fight. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velthari system, like a storm breaking through calm skies. 3,000 ships materialized in perfect formation, their angular hulls reflecting the light of the distant star. For a moment, space was completely silent except for the hum of engines and the whisper of radio communications. Admiral Lee Tae-min stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the horror that had once been a peaceful star system. The space around Velthari Prime was thick with Kethvor ships, so many that they blocked out the stars. Massive battleships hung in orbit like metal moons, while smaller vessels swarmed between them like angry insects. But it was the planet itself that made Taemin's hands clench into fists. Velthari Prime had once been green and beautiful, covered with farms and gardens. Now it was brown and scarred, its atmosphere thick with smoke from burning cities. The Kethvor had been busy in the weeks since their invasion. Sir, Commander Cho Minho reported from his station, we count 8,300 Kethvor vessels. They are arranged in a defensive shell around the planet, with their largest ships in high orbit. Captain Park Ji-woo studied the tactical display with professional interest. They are not expecting a real fight. This formation is designed to control territory, not defend against an attack. Their heavy ships are too far apart to support each other effectively. Taemin nodded. Signal the fleet. Combat Formation Alpha. All ships prepare for immediate engagement. The human fleet began to spread out, forming attack groups that could strike the Kethvor formation from multiple angles. The transformation was smooth and precise, the result of countless hours of training and drill. In minutes, 3,000 ships had reorganized into a weapon of war. On the Kethvor flagship, Supreme Admiral Bloodtalon watched the human arrival with amusement. He was a massive creature, even for a Kethvor, with armor-plated skin and forearms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had evolved from pack hunters, and he still carried the instincts of a predator. So, he said to his bridge crew, the humans have finally arrived. 3,000 ships against more than 8,000. They must be either very brave or very stupid. Captain Vexistar, standing at his side, was less confident. Supreme Admiral, their formation is unusual. I have never seen ships arrange themselves in such a pattern. Bloodtalon dismissed the concern with a wave of one clawed hand. All alien formations look strange until you understand their weakness. Open a channel to the human fleet. Let us hear what these creatures have to say before we destroy them. The communication came through on all frequencies, broadcast so that every ship in both fleets could hear it. Bloodtalon's voice was deep and harsh, like metal scraping against stone. Unknown human vessels, you have entered Kethvor territory without permission. The world below belongs to the Dominion now, and its people are our property. You will leave immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 standard hour to depart. On the human flagship, Communications Officer Lieutenant Yuna Young looked to Admiral Tae-min for instructions. The Admiral's expression was cold as winter ice. Open a channel, he ordered. All frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear this. The reply that came back made Bloodtalon's 4 eyes widen in surprise. The human voice was calm and steady, with no trace of fear or doubt. Kethvor Fleet, this is Admiral Lee Taemin of the Human Defense Force. We received a distress call from the peaceful inhabitants of this world. We have come to end your illegal occupation and free your prisoners. You will immediately cease all hostile operations and begin evacuation of the planet. You have 30 minutes to comply before we commence total annihilation protocols. Bloodtalon laughed, a sound like grinding gears. Total annihilation protocols? These humans are even more arrogant than I thought. Open fire on their lead ships. Let us teach them some respect. The Kethvor response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of weapons fired at once, sending streams of energy and clouds of missiles toward the human fleet. The space between the two forces lit up like a deadly fireworks display. But the humans were not where the HFY expected them to be. As soon as the enemy weapons fired, the human fleet scattered like a school of fish avoiding a predator. Their ships moved with impossible speed and precision, accelerating at rates that should have killed their crews. The HFY bombardment passed harmlessly through empty space. What are they doing? Blood Talon demanded. Why are they not maintaining formation? Captain Vex's Tar watched the tactical display with growing alarm. Sir, they are using individual ship tactics instead of fleet tactics. Each vessel is operating independently. This was something the HFY had never encountered before. Every other species fought space battles the same way. Large formations of ships moving together and firing in coordinated volleys. It was the civilized way to conduct warfare, with clear lines of battle and predictable movements. The humans fought like wild animals. Human destroyers dove straight toward the HFY battleships, their weapons blazing. They moved too fast for the heavy guns to track, weaving between enemy fire like dancers. Human fighters poured out of their carriers in endless streams, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would crush most alien pilots. Captain Ryu Jae-sung commanded one of the human dreadnoughts that was leading the charge into the HFY formation. His ship was built like a hammer. Thick armor, heavy weapons, and engines powerful enough to push it through anything in its way. All weapons, target the nearest battleship, he ordered. Close to point-blank range and give them everything we have. His ship's crew worked with mechanical precision. Human vessels carried larger crews than most alien ships because humans preferred to have backup systems for their backup systems. If one gunner was killed, 3 others could take his place. The dreadnought closed with a HFY battleship that was twice its size. The alien vessel fired frantically, its weapons tearing chunks of armor from the human ship's hull. But Jae-sung kept coming, his ship's guns returning fire with interest. At less than a kilometer apart, the human dreadnought opened up with every weapon it carried. The HFY battleship, designed to fight at long range, had no defense against such close-quarters violence. Its hull cracked like an eggshell, atmosphere and debris streaming from dozens of holes. Flight Commander Shin Bo-ram led her fighter squadron straight into the heart of the HFY formation. Her small ship twisted and turned between enemy vessels, its guns chattering as she targeted weapon systems and engines. "This is Falcon Leader," she called over the radio. "I count about 50 enemy fighters ahead of us. Looks like good hunting." The HFY fighters were larger and more heavily armed than human craft, but they flew like cargo ships compared to the human pilots. Bo-ram's squadron tore through them like hawks attacking pigeons. But the most terrifying aspect of the human attack was what happened when they decided they wanted an enemy ship intact. Instead of destroying vessels, human boarding parties would assault them directly. Major Oh Kyung-soo led one such assault against a HFY cruiser. His transport ship flew straight at the enemy vessel, ignoring the defensive fire that hammered against its armored hull. At the last second, the transport fired magnetic harpoons that locked the two ships together. "Go, go, go!" Oh shouted as his soldiers poured through the breach they had blown in the enemy hull. What followed was not a battle, but a nightmare. Human soldiers moved through the HFY ship like a plague, their weapons spitting death in all directions. They fought with a ferocity that shocked even the warlike HFY. When their guns ran empty, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their bare hands. The HFY had evolved from pack hunters, but humans had evolved from persistence hunters. They never stopped, never slowed down, never showed mercy to enemies who threatened peaceful people. Within an hour of the battle's start, the HFY formation was falling apart. Ships that had never faced serious opposition were burning and dying under the human assault. The neat defensive shell around Velthari Prime was breaking up into chaos and confusion. Supreme Admiral Blood Talon watched his fleet disintegrate with growing horror. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They are outnumbered 3-1. Captain Vextar had no answer. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They seemed to take actual pleasure in close combat, laughing over their radios as they destroyed enemy ships. Their tactics made no sense according to civilized rules of warfare. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving surrender requests from 17 ships. They are requesting permission to withdraw from the battle." Blood Talon's forearms trembled with rage. "Denied. Any ship that attempts to withdraw will be destroyed by our own forces. We did not conquer half the galaxy by running from primitive aliens. But even as he spoke, more Kethivore ships were breaking formation and trying to escape. The humans had turned what should have been an easy victory into a slaughter. Worse, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Admiral Taman watched the battle from his flagship's bridge with grim satisfaction. The Kethivore were learning what happened when someone attacked peaceful people while humans were watching. It was a lesson that would be remembered for generations. Sir? Captain Park reported, enemy resistance is collapsing. We estimate they have lost over 2,000. The second phase of the battle began when the human fleet stopped playing with their enemies and got serious about winning. Admiral Lee Tamin had spent the first hour letting his forces test Kethivore capabilities and tactics. Now he understood exactly what he was facing. A large but poorly coordinated fleet that relied on overwhelming numbers rather than skill or strategy. It was time to end this. All ships implement Annihilation Protocol 7, he broadcast to his fleet. I repeat, Annihilation 7 is now in effect. Across the human formation, captains and commanders acknowledged the order with grim satisfaction. Annihilation 7 was not just a battle plan. It was a promise that no enemy ship would escape to threaten innocent people ever again. The human fleet reorganized itself into hunting packs. Instead of fighting as one massive formation, they broke into smaller groups designed to surround and destroy individual enemy vessels. It was like watching a pack of wolves hunt a herd of cattle. Captain Ryu Jae-sung commanded a pack of 12 ships that targeted the largest Kethivore battleships. His dreadnought led the attack while destroyers and cruisers supported from multiple angles. The enemy ships were powerful, but they had been designed to fight other civilized species that followed predictable rules of engagement. Humans did not follow rules. Target their engine sections first, Jae-sung ordered. I want them crippled, not destroyed. We are going to take our time with this. His ships closed in on a massive Kethivore battleship like sharks circling a whale. The enemy vessel fired desperately, its weapons lighting up space with deadly energy. But the human ships moved like living things, dodging and weaving through the bombardment. The human attack was precise and methodical. First, they destroyed the battleship's engines, leaving it dead in space. Then they systematically eliminated its weapons, one gun at a time. Finally, they blew holes in the hull and sent boarding parties to capture any survivors. The Kethivore crew fought desperately, but they had never faced enemies like this before. Human soldiers moved through their ship like death itself, unstoppable and merciless. Within an hour, the mighty battleship was under human control. Flight Commander Shin Bo-ram was leading her fighters against the enemy's smaller vessels. The Kethivore had brought hundreds of escort ships and patrol craft to support their main fleet. These ships were now trapped between the human attack and their own larger vessels. Falcon Squadron, this is Leader, she called over the radio. Enemy fighters are regrouping near that big cruiser. Let us go introduce ourselves. Her squadron dove toward the Kethivore formation like falling stars. The enemy fighters tried to intercept them, but it was like trying to catch lightning with a net. Human pilots had been trained since childhood to handle forces that would kill most aliens. They flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies. The air battle became a massacre. Kethivore fighters exploded one after another as human weapons found their marks. The enemy pilots were brave and determined, but they simply could not match human reflexes and skill. Falcon Leader, this is Control, came a voice from the flagship. We have a priority target. Large transport trying to escape toward the outer system. Bo-ram looked at her scanner and saw the fleeing ship. It was packed with Velthari slaves being taken away to work in other Kethivore territories. The thought of those peaceful people spending their lives in alien slave camps filled her with cold rage. Falcon Squadron, follow me, she ordered. That transport is not going anywhere. Her fighters streaked across space toward the fleeing vessel. The transport was fast, but human fighters were faster. They caught up within minutes and began precise attacks on its engines and steering systems. The transport captain, realizing he could not escape, tried something desperate. He began using the Velthari prisoners as human shields, threatening to kill them if the humans did not back off. Bo-ram's response was immediate and deadly. Her fighters targeted the transport's weapon systems with surgical precision, destroying every gun and missile launcher, while carefully avoiding the sections where prisoners were held. Within minutes, the transport was helpless. This is Falcon Leader to transport vessel, she broadcast. You have 10 seconds to surrender and release your prisoners. After that, we start cutting your ship apart piece by piece until we reach the cargo bays. The transport surrendered immediately. Similar scenes were playing out across the entire battle zone. Human forces had divided into hunting packs that tracked down every enemy vessel with ruthless efficiency. The HFY fleet, which had seemed so massive and powerful just hours ago, was being systematically destroyed. Major Oh Kyung-soo was leading boarding operations against enemy ships that the fleet wanted to capture intact. His soldiers had developed tactics specifically for fighting in the narrow corridors of alien vessels. They moved in small teams, using speed and surprise to overwhelm enemy defenders. Team 3, take the bridge, he ordered, as his soldiers fought their way through a HFY cruiser. Team 5, secure the engine room. Team 7, find the prisoners and get them to safety. The HFY soldiers fought desperately, but they were not prepared for human close combat tactics. Humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They fought with a ferocity that shocked even warlike species like the HFY. When Oh's team reached the ship's prison section, they found dozens of Velthari packed into tiny cells. The peaceful aliens looked up at their rescuers with wonder and disbelief. They had never seen creatures fight with such determined violence to protect strangers. You are safe now, Oh told them in their own language, which he had learned during the journey to their world. We are taking you home. Supreme Admiral Bloodtalon watched his fleet die from the bridge of his flagship. In 6 hours of fighting, he had lost over half his ships. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating complete superiority in every aspect of space combat. Sir, Captain Vextar reported with barely controlled panic. The 3rd and 5th battle groups have been completely destroyed. The 7th is trying to withdraw, but human hunters are pursuing them. Bloodtalon slammed one of his 4 fists against the command console. How is this possible? We outnumbered them 3-1. The answer was simple, though the HFY commander could not understand it. The humans were not fighting a normal space battle. They were conducting an extermination operation. Every human ship, from the largest dreadnought to the smallest fighter, was operated by someone who had grown up on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had evolved to be the ultimate survivors, and they brought that evolution to warfare. Human pilots could handle accelerations that would turn most aliens into paste. Human soldiers could keep fighting with injuries that would kill other species. Human commanders made decisions with a speed and ruthlessness that left their enemies confused and terrified. Sir, Vextar continued, we are receiving reports that human forces have begun landing on the planet. They are attacking our ground installations. Bloodtalon turned to look at the tactical display showing Velthari Prime. Human assault ships were descending through the atmosphere like falling hammers, heading straight for the slave camps and military bases that the HFY had built on the surface. General Bae Dong-wook commanded the planetary assault from his command ship in orbit. He watched as his forces landed at dozens of sites across the planet's surface. Each landing zone had been carefully chosen to maximize the rescue of Velthari prisoners while minimizing casualties. First wave, secure the northern slave camps, he ordered. Second wave, take the southern industrial complex. Third wave, I want that spaceport captured intact. Move fast. We do not know how the HFY will react when they realize they are losing. The answer came quickly. As human forces spread across the planet, HFY commanders began implementing their contingency plans. If they could not keep their slaves, they would make sure no one else could have them either. Sergeant First Class Kim Dae-ho was leading his squad toward a slave camp when they heard the explosions. The HFY were destroying the facilities rather than let them be liberated. Thousands of Velthari prisoners were in immediate danger. Double time, Kim shouted to his soldiers. We need to reach those camps before the enemy kills everyone. His squad ran across the alien landscape, their powered armor allowing them to move faster than any unaugmented human could manage. Behind them, more explosions lit up the sky as the HFY continued their scorched earth tactics. They reached the camp just as HFY soldiers were preparing to execute the remaining prisoners. The guards were so focused on their grim task that they never saw the human soldiers approaching. The fight was brief and brutal. Human weapons cut through HFY armor like paper, and human soldiers moved with a speed and precision that left their enemies no time to react. Within minutes, the camp was secure and the prisoners were safe. This is Sergeant Kim to command, he reported over his radio. Camp 7 is secure. We have approximately 3,000 Velthari survivors, mostly in good condition. Similar reports came in from across the planet as human forces liberated camp after camp. The Keth 4 ground troops, demoralized by the destruction of their fleet and facing enemies who,